I said something on Shabbat that I feel was worth repeating. I said it during Sudat Shazid. How many people were here during Sudat Shazid? You were here? I want to just repeat it because it's important to be said. You may have heard it from me in different variations until today. But we're doing something new, we're doing something big, and it's our job to think together on what it is that we're doing. And this will be an intro to this piece. I had an identity crisis growing up. And forgive me, those of you who are on Shabbat, you'll hear it again. I was born in a Sephardic home. But in a Sephardic home where my father is Yemenite and my mother's Moroccan, and if you know anything about mothers being Moroccan, she's always going to be the one who dictates what happens in the home. So there was not really a Yemenite half, it was more of a Moroccan half, but it's hard to be raised Sephardic in San Diego, which when I was growing up didn't have any Sephardic rabbis around. And so you went to a school which was Ashkenazi day school for San Diego. And then you go to a synagogue which at the time was a Chabad synagogue. And already you have the struggle. So am I Sephardic? Am I Ashkenazi? Am I Chabad? And then I went off to yeshiva. And there I met a whole new world of people that I never knew existed. Lithuanian yeshiva Jews. And there I realized, hey, there's a big problem here. What am I? Am I Sephardic? Am I Yemenite? Am I yeshivish? Am I allowed to talk about Chabad over here? I'm Israeli, so my family, am I allowed to be a Zionist here? And all of a sudden you start having this crisis of, so what am I? And so the easiest thing to do at that point is just, you know what, I'm going to be what everyone else here is, and just melt in. That mitzvah of thou shalt melt, I never got in my Torah. And so normally I didn't melt as much as other people did, and it made for problems for me along the way, but ultimately I'm very grateful for those problems. And I had a big struggle. And the struggle was, what am I? And I'll tell you the truth is, at that point in my life, the Sephardic part of me was not very strong aside from just being my ethnicity. Nothing more than that. Not a philosophy, not halachot, not a sidur, nothing. 10th grade, 11th grade, I decided, you know what? I tried Chabad, Hasidic, Breslov, I tried. It's nice, I learned it, but it didn't do it for me. I tried Lithuanian and there was nothing doing here. I want to try, maybe I'll try Sephardic. That's not a genius idea, right? And so I got a Sephardic Siddur. I felt very rebellious, praying for a Sephardic Siddur. It was like, we're never on the same page. You're saying Kaddish, I'm in the middle of Ktoret, you don't even have Ktoret, I'm in the middle of Enkel Okeinu, who does Enkel Okeinu? Well, it's one of those things. But hey, every day you're there for 15 minutes after Tefillah because you have 10 more pages and nobody, I don't know what you did after Shemona Esrei, but I still had to pray. At least when you pray with Hasidim, they have most of the same stuff after Tefillah that we do. So I start with the Sephardic Siddur, and then I start learning Sephardic Halachot, Ben Ish Chai, and Rabbi Vadi Yosef, and so on and so forth. But I really had a problem. And my problem was that I loved Chassidut, and I really looked up to my rabbis who were Litvish. But I had a problem with both of them for the following reason. The Lithuanians hate Chassidim. They still do. They just cover it up today better than they used to. They used to beat each other up in the street and put each other in prison. Today they don't fight physically, or not even verbally, but there's a lot of talking down about Chassidim. You say something in class like, oh, let's explain the Talmud this way, and it's a silly way to explain, oh, don't give us a Chassidish pshat. That's what they'll tell you. Like, Chassidim explain things that silly. Or, you'll say something about the Baal Shem Tov. I'm afraid to speak blasphemy. To them, the Baal Shem Tov is not even a tzaddik. He's not really even a rabbi. The author of the Tanya, we don't even know who he was. Maybe just another guy. Like that. I'm speaking like, that's how it's spoken about. And for me, how could you put down such big tzaddikim of the whole world? How do you not know them, or not learn them, or not... You don't want to study them, fine, but not respect them. How could you do such a thing? And so then we got to go to the Chassidim. And I realized the other problem with Chassidim, anyone who has an inferiority complex will always be just as vicious as the people who are against them. And all of a sudden you start hearing the Misnagdim this and the Misnagdim that, and the opponents did this, and 300 years later we're still celebrating when we got put into jail and got taken out of jail. Why are we still pushing a stigma that nobody's putting anybody in jail anymore? Why are we still teaching our kids, oh, that's what misnagdim do? Why? And there was a second problem. The problem was that in the Hasidic world, Sfaradim don't exist. Now, I'm not saying about the Baal Shem Tov or Rav Elimelech of Lezhensk. I'm talking about today. Your average Hasid on the street, stop him. Ask him something about Sfaradim. We're not part of the Jewish community. We're just not. We're, like they exist somewhere in Flatbush. That's what you hear. We know they came out with their robes and their turbans, but today they're all taxi drivers. That's what we are, Sfaradim. That's what the Rambam and the Rif and Shulchan Aruch and Ben Ish Chai, we all became, we disappeared into nothingness. I said, these two worlds, I love both of them, but they're not complete. They're not whole. And then I kind of stumbled upon Sephardic Jewry by accident. I'm telling you this not because I was Sephardic that I studied Sephardic Judaism. And a phenomenal thing happened to me. I opened up the books of the Chida, Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai. And he has a list of all the holy rabbis in the generations until him. And you open it up to Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. And he has a whole piece on this holy man who started the Hasidic movement. Stories about him and how righteous he was. I open up the Ben Ish Chai from Baghdad. And you open up and hey, look, he quotes Hagaon Rabbeinu Zalman, the genius Rabbi Zalman, the founder of Chabad Hasidut. I open up the writings of Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. Say, look over there. He quotes Rabbi Shmuel Shmelka of Nicholsburg. Look at that. He quotes Rav Kook and he calls him Hagaon Harav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, the genius Rabbi Kook. And then I say, wait a second. Why are Sephardic rabbis quoting Hasidic rabbis? But they weren't done. Do you know who's the biggest hero of Ashkenazi Jewry for Sephardim? The Vilna Gaon. He loved the Vilna Gaon. Obsessed with the Vilna Gaon. I'll tell you what, rightfully so. If you ever studied from the Vilna Gaon, you would be obsessed with him too. You never met such a mind in your life. When you read his, it's unbelievable.
Isn't he the one that we follow in the Gemara?
Well, regarding texts. Yeah. Very good. That's the way. But didn't the Baal Shem Tov and the Vilna Gaon fight with each other? So how do you quote them on the same page? And then I realized something very beautiful. That in my tradition, our rabbi said, listen, the Baal Shem Tov was a tzaddik. The Vilna Gaon was a tzaddik. Rav Kook was a tzaddik. Did people fight with each other? Of course, but it's not my fight. It's not my problem. I'm not disqualifying any of them. I'm going to follow all of them as much as I can. Did we agree with all of them and everything they said? No. But suddenly I saw Sephardic Judaism was not just for Sfaradim, but it was an inclusive lifestyle that allowed every other tzaddik to exist.
What you do is walk in any supermarket in Yerushalayim or LA, they've got pictures of all the tzaddikim, including the Ashkenazim.
Very good. You have the Baba Sali and Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu and the Lubavitcher Rebbe and whoever else, Rav Shach, and whoever you can have over there.
I figured that out 25 years ago.
But this is our heritage. And so when I come now as, hey, listen, we're doing something new. Which heritage can I give that is the most inclusive, not exclusive? Which heritage can I tell you? All of our rabbis believed that all the other rabbis were holy. Sephardic Judaism. It's not that there were not Ashkenazim that were also wholesome, of course, but they're part of the same tradition. And therefore when I say Sephardic rabbis this, Sephardic rabbis that, I'm talking about people who took into consideration all of Klal Yisrael, not just their part of Klal Yisrael. Something I don't find from any other segment of the Jewish people. And I hope that part of us reconnecting to that heritage will be that other people around us will realize 300 years ago, Hasidim and Mitnagdim put each other in jail. Today, there's barely enough of us to fight, let alone to pray together. There was a rabbi who once gave a mashal. He said, it used to be there was a father-in-law. The father-in-law would support their sons-in-law. The daughter got married, part of the dowry, well, yeah, for 5 years we'll support you. We'll give you to eat every day. We'll give you a place to live.
Right.
And he said they had two sons-in-law. It was a very wealthy man. And one of them said, part of my dowry, I only eat meat. I don't want any of your cheap dairy food. Only meat. I said, okay, fine. The other daughter got married. The guy says, I don't like meat. I like only dairy. So I only want dairy. And so he had an interesting thing at his house. Was that he had two tables. One for his son-in-law that always ate meat. And one for his son-in-law that always ate dairy. And every day they would come in, they would sit at their separate tables and eat lunch and dinner. Time went on. The man's business fell apart. He ended up losing all the money that he had. And all they had to eat was potatoes. And comes that night for dinner, they're all eating potatoes. Mashed potatoes. I don't know what they're eating. And so the son-in-law comes in, and one goes to his table, and the other one goes to his table. And the father-in-law bangs his fork down on the table. I don't understand. 4 years now, we had a lot of money. We had meat, we had dairy, we had fish, we had reasons to sit at different tables. But today we're barely eating potatoes. You can't just now sit at the same table. The same thing. Once upon a time, we had enough Jews to go around, enough people that could fight with each other, that you had Hasidim here, and Mitnagdim there, and Sfaradim there, and religious people there, and non-religious. You know what the world has done to us? You know what the Galut has done to us? We lost 6 million of us. We're barely breathing when it comes to the world scene and how much they want us to live. And now is not the right time where we could just, let's forget our tables and sit down together. It's time for that already. It's time that rabbis of all the different groups that are halakhically valid stop saying that the other ones aren't Jewish. And stop ignoring the heritage and the teachings and the traditions of all of them. If a rabbi today has never studied Tanya before, he has a problem. He's ignoring a whole part of Jewish literature. If a rabbi has never studied Rabbi Chaim Volozhin's Nefesh HaChaim, which was written to fight the Tanya, he's missing out on another part of Judaism. If a rabbi has never opened up the Ben Ish Chai before, he's missing out on another part of Jewish tradition. It's time for us to all just get our act together and sit at the same table. And with that in mind, I was thinking about how we do it. And so, I normally mention to you Sephardic rabbis that you've never heard of before. But there's an Ashkenazi rabbi that I want to represent tonight that I don't know that we've all heard about him before. His name was Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg. Have you heard of him before? He wrote a book called the Sridei Esh, the survivors of the fire. He was a rabbi who survived the Holocaust. He passed away in 1966. He was born in the late 1800s. He was born in Poland, and he was part of the Musar movement. You know what the Musar movement was? Very good. Started by Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. Now, Jews always studied Musar, but these people took the word Musar and made it into their own movement. Kind of like the Hasidim. We always had Hasidim. But they took the word Hasidim and turned it into a movement. The Musar movement was criticized by many for being too rigid, too strict, too tough, too harsh. Not always accurately. It was persecuted just as much as any other new movement was, but very holy people. The Chavetz Chaim was part of this movement. Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler, if you've heard of him, was part of this movement. Rabbi Wolbe was part of this movement. Big tzaddikim. Rabbi Weinberg studied by them. And then a crazy thing happened. And being an Orthodox rabbi in Eastern Europe who decided to pursue his secular career and receive a PhD in Germany, was not so heard of in the early 1900s. Not in Shtetl, Poland. But he did it anyways. And he got a PhD in Masoretic literature, the Jewish scriptures in Germany. Some of the students of Rav Weinberg are very famous. There was a Rabbi Eliezer Berkowitz in Chicago you might have heard of. I've never studied his things in depth, but he was a posek that was a student of his. The Lubavitch Rebbe, Alav Shalom, studied by Rav Weinberg for a period of time. The Sridei Esh was a famous rabbi. When he came to Germany, he really struggled with German Jewry. What do you know about German Jewry? Rigid. What do you know about them religious-wise?
Reform.
This was like the headquarters of Reform Judaism.
They have a charter in Jerusalem for their neighborhoods. No synagogues allowed.
So the Germans it was pretty intense. The Reform movement was in Berlin. The Reform movement was up and running against the traditional Orthodox lifestyle of Europe. And they did it in a few ways that were very significant, and they might not sound so significant today. The first one was the studying of secular subjects. Jews were suddenly going to universities. They were studying academic fields. They were leaving their and German Jewry as a whole didn't look like the shtetls of Eastern Europe. It was a very different scene. So it made sense that if it was going to start somewhere, it was going to be here. On top of that, the early reform movement saw that Jews were running away from the synagogues because they were too old and irrelevant to practical life. And the biggest thing was that the rabbis were still speaking Yiddish. And Yiddish was, cultured people don't speak this Yiddish language. They speak German. And so the rabbis in the reform movement started speaking in German. Do you know the rabbis how long a speech of a rabbi used to be on Shabbat? In most synagogues, even in America, until the 60s or 70s. What? About 2 hours. During Tefillah. An hour and a half if they were rushing, I read an interesting from Rabbi Weinberg. He says the reason why they were so long, you have to remember that most people didn't have entertainment. There was no TV, there were no movies. You heard people, I'm going to go to that synagogue because he gives a great sermon. It was kind of like going to a production. It was almost like, and they used to prepare their sermons all week long. The rabbinate was very ceremonial. And part of the sermon was, I guess people listened because they had nothing better to do. And also because it was like the highlight of the week, was to go to a sermon. Today, they talk for more than 3 minutes. People start moving in their chairs. People are sleeping already. There are all kinds of things like that. Sometimes I wonder if I finish early, if people are going to wake up, or they just know that I'm going to speak for that long, so they wake up again. It's not a set time. But rabbis, yeah?
Different ways. Service over, then he used to 2 o'clock when we come back.
Right, because he was Hasidic. I mean, there wasn't a synagogue life, it was a Hasidic life. It was very different than Western Europe. Yeah, you're right. Now, what happened also was that rabbis used to only speak how many times a year? Twice. Very good. When?
Yom Kippur.
Before Yom Kippur, Shabbat Shuvah, and Pesach, Shabbat Gadol. Very good. It was considered beneath a rabbi to speak publicly. Teaching Jews publicly was considered a lack of respect to your average Ashkenazi rabbi. He was meant to be a scholar, somebody who was studying, writing books, answering letters. He wasn't supposed to be dealing with meager things like writing, talking to people, and counseling, and giving classes. That wasn't what rabbis did. In Germany, though, the Reform rabbis started being more with it. They gave speeches every week. It was already a new scene. There was music in the churches. And so the Reform rabbis added organs and choirs and all kinds of things like that to compete with them. And they believed that it was going to bring back a significant amount of these young people who were running away. Along comes Rabbi Shamshon, Rafael Hirsch, very good. Rabbi Hirsch, you've seen him on the Chumash before. Rabbi Hirsch coined this Torah in Derech Eretz, Torah with profession, with education. And he opened up an institute where people studied Torah and also secular subjects. And you can imagine that he went under some serious criticism from Eastern Europe.
His Chumash is superb.
Incredible. They actually put out a new English translation of his Chumash. I recommend it now. I'm saving it now to buy one of those. I saw it in New York, and the first time I saw it, a brand new English. It used to be like a very archaic kind of English. Someone did a very good job in it. Rav Hirsch, aside from being a brilliant Talmid Chacham, knew what his community needed, and he felt that he was going to feed into those needs. Rav Hirsch started speaking German instead of Yiddish. He started giving speeches every Shabbat, and he introduced a choir into the services. None of these things went over well with the traditional Jewish community. The German Jews loved it, and he ended up actually single-handedly saving German Jewry. Broyers, Washington Heights, that whole... You ever buy chicken from Empire and see a little KAJ on it in a rectangle?
Sure.
That's his hechsher. I mean, that hechsher is still around today in Washington Heights. It's one of the most strict hechshers in America today. His community survived, but not just survived, they flying colors. Rav Hirsch,
So they moved before Holocaust?
some came before, some came afterwards. Rav Hirsch, he's from a long time ago, was followed by Rabbi Hilzheimer. In the academic world, they like to call it neo-orthodoxy, what he started, but I don't like that term so much. Yeah, it's not my favorite term. Rav Hirsch, though, did get an interesting reaction from Ashkenazi rabbis in Eastern Europe, which was, they said, listen, we understand that you have to do what you need to do, but keep it in Germany. We don't want any shtetls having secular studies. We don't need any shtibels over here having choirs inside of them. We let you do what you believe you can do. We trust you, but only in Germany. You always know there's this famous war between the classic Lithuanian yeshivas and, let's say, Yeshiva University. It didn't start today. It goes back from when they came to America and started Torah al-Mad'a, Torah with science and the spirit of Rav Hirsch. These guys said, listen, you only had permission to do this in Germany, not in America. And it's an old... You have to know Jewish history to appreciate all these little Jewish battles. Why am I sharing with you all of this? Rabbi Weinberg became a big leader of that community and put out many tshuvot that today are not in the scope of our discussion. Allowing ladies to sing at the Shabbat table, certain things that he was spearheading, which probably have made him... You're allowed to mention Rabbi Weinberg in Orthodox circles. The Srida Ish, you hear him sometimes, but nobody actually studies him. Nobody learns his writings really, because rabbis like this were too ahead of their times to be incorporated into traditional Judaism. And I was reading something that he wrote. I'll tell you, the sadness of it is that his writings are so splendid, but because the Jewish street doesn't appreciate them so much, he should forgive me for saying. But I went to New York now to buy his books. And I bought 2 sets, one of his letters and one of his philosophy. And I picked up this set. It's a brand new set, laser print, the whole thing. And I picked it up and I went over to the guy selling and I said, how much does the set cost? I looked at it. $22. I said, per volume? Yeah, for the whole thing, he said. I said, what about this one? He said, $20. I looked at him and said, you don't know what you're selling. You'll sell me a book that some I don't want to say what, wrote yesterday and printed in English, and he wrote 6 volumes on the laws of Asher Yatzal. That one you're going to sell for $300. But gold, you're giving out for $20? I couldn't believe it. And it was a sad thing for me. The world doesn't appreciate certain chachamim. Rabbi Weinberg left behind a series of essays that he wrote. And when I got the shipment on Friday, I almost went late into Shabbat because I was reading this letter. It's a very long piece. It was an open letter to my Chiloni brethren, to my non-observant brethren in Israel. It's titled Et Echai Anochi Mevakesh. If you remember, Yosef goes out and he says, I'm searching for my brothers. Where are they? We went to the field and looked for them. He says, I'm looking for my brothers. This is an open letter to my brothers. And I printed parts of it. I literally cut and pasted onto paper and photocopied it for you. And I wanted to do it with you. But the basis of this whole piece is you're going to hear a lot of catchphrases today. In the world, there was a famous... his name should be erased and destroyed. He was a Nazi philosopher. Joseph, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Goebbels? His name should be erased, destroyed, wiped out, obliterated. I don't know what his... He had a famous quote. Listen, I saw it online. So, like I told you on Shabbat, I don't trust quotes from the internet. Somebody once sent me a quote from the internet that said, you should never trust quotes from the internet. Abraham Lincoln. That was I don't know if he really said it or not, but whoever said it was right in this regard. Said he who masters the language has won the war. I'll give you an example. We've spoken here about abortion before. Do we do abortion? Not abortion. Halachically, I told you that both camps are wrong. There are times where yes, and times that are no, and the Torah tells us when is right and when is not. But look at the people who are putting out the phrases, the catchphrases, the propaganda. It's called, what are the 2 sides of the battle called?
Pro-life?
Pro-life and pro-choice. Why do they use these words?
I don't think it's pro.
Pro is a positive, but what is it? What if you tell somebody, I'm not for pro-life? You're against life? What kind of human being is against life? And they play on the word. I mean, we're talking here about abortion. Pro-life is a catchphrase that you invented. The other way around. Pro-choice. You're against pro-choice? Well, you're a democratic person and you want to oppress me that I cannot make a choice? What kind of person are you? I just heard now about a building that was trying to get zoning somewhere. And it was actually a Bet Knesset somewhere. And they hired must have been a very smart lawyer. He says, there's one old guy that comes to pray in the synagogue. And he comes in his wheelchair. And it's really hard for him to travel. He has to, roll the wheels on his own. It's really hard for him to make it any farther than the house right next door to his house. And so that's why we want it zoned like a synagogue, because it's okay if you don't want a religious place in your neighborhood. But how can you deprive a senior citizen of his right to connect to God? And they won in court because they managed to convince them that you're oppressing senior citizens. He who masters the language won the war. We do this a lot in our world. You'll say something. I'm not arguing with that, but suddenly you're bad because you argue against a catchphrase.
Building department, handicap facilities. The law came one day, next day everybody has to follow. There's no time period, 6 months time, no. Handicap facility, they have right to have it. You have to follow everything.
About these words, let's say pro-Israel. Are you allowed to be pro-Israel and also critical of Israel?
That's choice.
Well, it depends upon what you're critical about.
Yeah.
I'm pro-Israel, but I critique a lot of what Israel does. And very often I get met with the argument of, how can you be so anti-Israel? What do you mean I'm not anti-Israel. I'm the most pro-Israel, but I think that it's better for... No, you're not pro-Israel, so it must be you're an anti-Semite. All of a sudden, I went from being... Now I'm a rabbi who's an anti-Semite. Can you imagine that?
Being enslaved by wrong use of language.
Very good.
You're not thinking, you're just reacting to words that someone else has determined.
Very good.
Like the whole thing with Palestinians.
Oh, it's
Whoever came up with that word
as a people, and now if you deny it, you're denying a people their statehood. It's an incredible... Whoever did that and got us to use that word is amazing. Which is why here, look at the top 3 words on the page. This is obviously before Hebrew developed into a more usable language. He writes, Rak lo... Can you tell me what that word means? Phrazot. Just not phrases. Don't give me catchphrases. He's opening up his letter to the world, and after a few paragraphs he says, the part we're starting with is, just don't sell me your catchphrases. So you want to have unity with me? Do you want to be close with me? Stop with the catchphrases, and I'm going to explain to you what he's getting at. Clearly he's critical of the way the secular world was treating his community. And he felt that he needed to write an open letter. And you're throwing out words like unity, like loving Jews, Ahavat Yisrael, all kinds of... By the way, we all are familiar, especially those of you recently in our community, you'll be here, what about unity? What about Achdut? What about this? What about... Let me ask you a question. I'm being extreme, because extremes always prove a point. They're not right, but they're proving a point. Do you have to love a fellow Jew who's a murderer?
Well, you're not supposed to hang around Russia.
Well, does he regret it?
There could be conditions. So if he regrets it, you would say yes?
Because he obviously knew it was wrong. If he's going to keep himself...
But what did I just show you? That the catchphrase of love your fellow Jew is not as black and white as you would want it to believe. Clearly there are people that you might say, hey, it's complicated if I really have to love them. Put up with them, maybe. Love them? Wait, but are you against loving Jews? No, I'm not against loving Jews. I just believe the term is more complicated than your juvenile definition of it. Unity. Let's imagine unity for a moment. Forget their stance on Israel, please. I'm not talking politics. The United Nations. Can you imagine how incredible that is? Nations sitting down together in the same place and having dialogue and communication instead of going to war and killing each other. We now have a United Nations. You have countries that are hanging people in the streets and cutting their throats out, and right now they're sitting down together for dialogue with Western countries that are guilty of crimes such as raising the tax on maple syrup or whatever it is, right? And you're saying, hey, we got unity. Tell me, is that really unity? Is that a good thing, that kind of unity? Do we want to be sitting together at tables with murderers? But are you against unity? Are you trying to tell me you're against open dialogue and communication?
It's politically correct.
That's the way the world works, though, today. And says Rabbi Weinberg, you want to talk to me about Ahavat Israel? Do you want to talk to me about loving Jews, about unity, about being one people? He said, then you have to stop with the catchphrases. Because the catchphrases are juvenile. And in the 9 days, you'll hear many catchphrases. And you have to know that the reason why there is no unity is because we're selling something that cannot last. You cannot be united with people who hate you. So in order to have unity, there has to be things that are done before to get rid of the hatred. Very good. So how could you ask me to unite with someone who hates me? Meaning unity is a value, but in order to reach true unity, you have to take other steps first. A husband and a wife should always be peaceful together. Yeah, but if they have problems with each other, then before they can have peace, they'll have to go to therapy. And it's not a bad thing, it's a normal thing. So you tell them, oh, how come you guys can't get along with each other? You're being juvenile about the problem. There's a problem that they can deal with, and once they take the steps to deal with the problem, then they'll be able to be united. So let's start off with this paragraph. Rak lo frazot. Just not catchphrases. He says, let's ki over lehidabrut hadadit. He said, we want to talk about hidabrut hadadit, mutual conversation, open dialogue. He says, before we can have open dialogue, chiyuni kodem kol, it's necessary before that, she'ish yavin et re'ehu, that we must understand each other. Zeu be'etzem klal atik, it's an old rule, v'yashan noshan, it's very ancient. In order to be able to dialogue with each other, we have to define our terms. We have to define who we are. Rabbi Aaron once taught me a very profound message. He said, you have organizations, and I'm saying this in a good way, like Esha Torah, for example, in the Old City. They do tremendous work getting people about Hashem, proving to them all kinds of things about Hashem. But you have to imagine what happens in a person's head. A person's raised in pretty much Christian America. God is some man with a big beard, sits on top of a throne in a cloud somewhere, zapping people with lightning bolts. And there's all kinds of angels and things like that too, but for right now, let's focus on God. And a person matures and he grows up, he goes to university, he realizes, hey, just like I don't believe in Santa Claus and I don't believe in the Tooth Fairy, I also don't believe in this God who sits on a cloud. We have telescopes in the sky and we haven't found them yet. Terrible things happen in the world, and a God that is supposed to be all good and all gracious and all compassionate, how could he let... My logic tells me that God doesn't exist. And so now he's finally a happy person. He's no longer troubled by this guilt of his youth that there's some man in the sky that's going to zap him with a lightning bolt. And then he goes to the kotel, he goes on some birthright trip. And some guy drags him into a class, they sit him down, and using scientific terms and academic language, they prove to him that God exists. Now I'm using these words very lightly, okay? I'm just saying. And the guy comes out of there, and instead of being blown away and inspired, you now met the most depressed individual in his whole life. Because the one thing that he knew logically could never exist, because it's such a bad concept. A man sitting in the sky, but we can't see him, he zaps people, he judges people, all kinds of things. Now you've proven to him that it's real. And now he's stuck with a God that he hates, but he's forced to believe in. Rabbi Aaron said we'd be much better off not proving to him that God exists, but instead sitting down with him and telling him, hey, this is what we mean when we say Hashem. It's not what you're thinking in your head. This is who Hashem really is. This is what Hashem is really all about. And then you'll find the person, maybe he won't even need proving to, but you first have to define your terms. We don't believe in the same God that Christians believe in. We don't believe clearly in the same God the Muslims are believing in. Very good. Very good. And so before we prove to people that God exists, maybe we have to revisit, what do we mean when we say God? We sit sometimes, Christians, Muslims, we're part of the same monotheistic religion. Are we really? Do we really believe the same things about Hashem? Somebody once came to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. It's a famous story. He said, Rebbe, I'm an atheist. And Lubavitcher Rebbe said, I am too. And the guy looked at him, come on, you're an atheist. You and all these Hasidim, you're an atheist? How could you be an atheist? The Rebbe said, the God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. No. And the God that I believe in, you don't know the first thing about it. And that's the foundation of our Judaism. And we try to unite with people because we all have the same God, you'll find that it's going to be a problem because we don't really have the same God. We might use the same English words, but they don't mean the same thing. Says Rabbi Weinberg, do you want to have unity? The first step to open dialogue is to actually be open. What are we? Who are we? אלא שאין הדבר אפשרי. He says, but it's impossible to define yourself and to speak about who you are. Is there room if you move down? Maybe we could bring Jack in. No, you sure? Yeah, okay. It's impossible to dialogue and define each other. רק כאשר כל צד מדבר במילים ברורות. Only when each side will speak with clear, precise words. כאשר כל אחד רוצה לבטא במילים פשוטות את רעיונותיו ושאיפותיו. Only when people are willing to explain their beliefs in simple, clear terms, not vague, not ambiguous, nothing metaphorical. Explain to us clearly what it is that you are, what do you believe in, what are your goals, where are you going. Unless we have this conversation, we will never be able to have any kind of mutual dialogue. And then he says, "Be'emtsaut milim mitzalzelot," through the means of words that are very attractive, ufrazot yafot, and nice phrases, o hitlahavut meusa, or artificial passion. אפשר לכל היותר לסנוור עיני המון של בורים קרואים לנשף. He said you're able to blind the masses who are uneducated and unintelligent. You can blind them with catchphrases, with false passion, with all kinds of nice words. Sham, the praza hatza'akanit. It says, for example, your loud words which you scream out, hashilton, government, hakavod, honor to the Jewish people, hatzlacha, the success of the Jewish people. All of those words, the masses buy into them very much. But we who are more educated than them are asking you, what do you really mean when you say those words? אך את היריב בעל ההכרה עלולים דבריו כאילו רק להרגיז ולשסה. בן אדם מכובד ומהוגן לא ייתן עצמו להיסחף במאבק עם פרזה צעקנית ונבונה. He said, but an intelligent person will never allow himself to be carried away by your catchphrases. וקל וחומר שרגש הכבוד העצמי שפועם בחובו לא יתנהו להיכנע מנוצח לעומתה. And even more than he won't go along with your catchphrases, the integrity of such a person will not let you win him over with such phrases. רק לא פרזות, just not catchphrases. זהו התנאי הראשון להידברות הדדית. Do you want to have mutual open dialogue with us? This is our first condition. No catchphrases. Don't throw Ahavat Yisrael at me. Don't throw unity at me. If you want to talk, we have to talk straight.
That story I told you this morning.
Oh, now very good. But I was inspired by what you told me. When I saw this piece, I said every cent that I put into these books was worth it, just for this paragraph. We are taught things that are not realistic. This is what Judaism means when it says unity. But before unity, you have to have some kind of dialogue. And before you have dialogue, you have to be willing to take off the costume and speak honestly, what are you? We know that you're good at marketing, but what are you really all about? Ulam gam t'nai shani v'nosaf lanu. He says, I'm going to add a second condition. Sheba'etzem rabah chashivuto k'tnai hakodmo. It's just as important as the first condition. Anu dorshim mi'irivenu mi'mitnagdenu. I ask from our opponents and those who are fighting us. Shidabru milim burot. Speak clear words. V'yagidu kol asher b'libam lelo hamadat panim. He said, say everything that's on your mind about us, and don't be nice to us. Tell us what you're really feeling. You know, in America, we say, yeah, tell us what you're really feeling. But really, that's what you're supposed to say. Really tell us what you're really feeling. Tell us how angry you are. Tell us how much you hate us. Tell us how much you don't like us. Tell us how much you don't appreciate us. Lo lahalim shum davar. Don't hide anything. V'lo lehotir ma'achor sfichei rayonot. Don't hide anything in fancy philosophical ideas. רעיונות סמויים ונסתרים, כוונת צדדיות, בלתי אמורות, Don't leave anything to puns, to maybe subtle hints. Don't. Just say it the way it is. He said, because the danger of hiding your true intentions behind nice words is that people might believe that your nice words are the main belief and your true intentions are not what you really intend. What he's saying is, don't be politically correct. Tell us, you want to have that, maybe to the world you have to be politically correct. But if you want to build a relationship with us, you have to tell it to us like it is. Tell us what you're really about. Tell us what you don't like. The next paragraph, Hiyu kinim v'yisharim. Be honest and be straight with us. Higidu et kol ma she'atem rotzim lema'aseh. Tell us everything that you practically want from us. Now I'm assuming, by the way, that this article, I don't have for sure facts, but I'm assuming this article was written based on the secular Jew's attitude. I don't like that word, but in this context he's using these words. Is general Israeli society's attitude towards the religious Jews not taking enough part in government, or taking part in the army, or taking part in academia, or taking part in working, or taking part, whatever it is they felt they were not taking a part of. You're not part of the people, you're not in with the people. And there are other points that he brings out in this letter about religion and all kinds. I'm not dealing... No, this is the era of the founding of the State of Israel. It's now. Here.
Oh.
Yeah, this article was written in...
A lot of religious also would say.
Right.
Since the end of Judaism and since then...
Right. This is like the 40s, 50s, 60s. He says, be honest with us. Tell us everything you want. Also tell us the things that you don't want. Tell us the things you don't like. Tell us what you do like. Tell us what you don't like. But be honest with us. What do you want to build? And what about us do you want to destroy? What do you want to give life to? And what do you want to kill about us? What do you want to fortify? And what do you wish to knock down? And what do you wish to derail? What do you wish to plant firmly in this ground? And what do you wish to uproot? So you have problems with us that we're religious.
To everything there is a season.
Right. Oh, yeah. So what is it that... It's exactly the same wording, but it's a play on those words. Very good. Shlomo HaMelech uses similar terminology. There's a time for peace, a time for war, a time for laughter, a time for crying. Here, he's saying, just tell us honestly. You like certain things about us. You like that we pray. I don't know. But you don't like that we don't... So tell us what it is that, if in your ideal world, what you would get rid of about us. Tell us. Don't hide it. He says, "Hen lechol hasiSmaot hachadashot she'afrachatam lo rak tzad chiyuvi ki gam shlili." He says, all of your catchphrases have also negative sides to them that you're not actually verbalizing. Uvahen hatzakani shelachem samui gam lav chashayim. He said, for example, in your pro-life argument, you're essentially also saying that you're anti-choice, but you're choosing not to say I'm anti-choice, you're choosing to use the word of pro-life. In your use of the word of, let's all integrate and become one Jewish people, you're hiding the fact that you want us to assimilate and become one Jewish people. So tell us, you want us to integrate and assimilate. Don't just hide behind the words that people like to hear. Everybody wants to be integrated into society. But tell us the price that we have to pay for our integration into your society. Now, those of you who've thought about these concepts before, I hope you're appreciating Rabbi Weinberg's brilliance just as much as I am.
Yeah, cool.
This is a very refreshing piece. It's not nice. It's not politically correct. But it's full of truth. It's an open letter. I have to tell you how I feel.
Did anybody take him up on his own?
I didn't see a response in the book, but I have to research more.
A big response to this. I just have a feeling.
Right? No, I could be an article. I don't know. I don't know what actually happened. His writings are also very new to me. They're all of a week old, so I'm sharing with you new Torah. He says, "Madua gazartem ilem al halav shalachem." Why do you force your negative comments to be quiet? Hargashatenu hapnimit locheshet lanu. Our innermost being whispers in our ear, "Shatem mastirim mashu meitanu." That you're trying to hide something from us. You're not telling us all of your plans for the future. So it's for this reason that we're very, very scared, and we're very frightened from you. Right now what Rabbi Weinberg did is he became very vulnerable. He put himself out on the line, and actually in the original work, in between this paragraph and the next, Rabbi Weinberg has a piece where he says, and you ask us why we're so scared. Why are we such frightened people? And Rabbi Weinberg says, let me tell you a little bit about our history. He says, we have many, many reasons to be scared. And many, many reasons to be worried. He said, we've been burned many, many times in the past. He said, and I'm just explaining to you that our reality is that we worry when people like you come to us with such passionate ideals. Because we know that behind those ideals is hiding something entirely different. What do you guys think so far?
Great.
Thoughts? The reason I'm bringing this up now is because it's the 9 days. And I want this to be kind of a counter method to things that you may be hearing. About, in any sermon, any lecture, we keep talking about peace. And after 2,000 years, we haven't been able to do it. It could be because we haven't taken these steps.
That's what's happening with the mention too that someone heard a sermon and they were very upset because they were talking about this is enough Hinam and Lashon Hara and everyone's going yes. It doesn't change anything unless, as Rabbi Weinberg is putting it, you sit down and go, what's going on? What are you really feeling? What do your words really mean?
Right.
That's like the Jewish people need like marriage counseling.
Yeah, but in order to have that marriage counseling, we have to be willing to really say what we feel, not to impress the counselor.
Here, do you think this kind of dialogue is possible?
Clearly he believes it is. And by the way, I'm not so much going with this piece on his attitude towards secular Jewry, as much as I'm talking in between our religious factions that we have. How much more so by us, where there is what to dialogue, there is what to talk about. We have more in common than we have separate from each other. By then, unity is not a easy thing to accomplish that you just pull out of your hat and everyone's united. Clearly we've been having problems with this department. It's because we haven't been willing to be this honest with each other. You know, very often when, in European history for example, when the Hasidim and the Mitnagdim chose to unite, and they did by the way, 3 generations after their big fight, you already find it in Volozhin, Rav Yitzchak of Volozhin, the son of Rav Chaim of Volozhin, was working hand in hand with the Tzemach Tzedek of Lubavitch, the third Lubavitch Rebbe, right? The third Rebbe. They were already working together. But the reason they were working together, now I'm not judging, I'm just telling you the reason that they told us why they were working together, was because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. They now had a common enemy called the Reform Movement. And they chose that instead of fighting between each other, it was better to join forces and fight the other faction. That is not actually unity. And you'll see that it didn't last forever. Is that the word that's used for it?
Yeah, it's like, you're together with me as long as we need.
It's a friend of convenience. The Rambam mentions a friend of convenience, the Rambam says. And it's true, it didn't last. Look, it didn't last until today. Maybe things got better, but they didn't last. I mentioned to you on Shabbat, there were 2 rabbis in Yemen. One was a certain Rabbi Halevy, not related, from the town called Sana'a, the capital of Yemen. Also the city of all the Torah scholars in Yemen. And another rabbi called Rabbi Kafich, or Rabbi Kapach, as he's known in Israeli circles. You heard of him? The father of Rabbi Yosef Kapach, Rabbi Yichya Kapach, the grandfather. Rav Kapach started a movement in Yemen called the Dardeim, or the Dordeim, depends how you pronounce them. They were, very good. No, it's not. It's a play on words of Dor, the generation of Da'ah, of knowledge. These guys were idol worshippers because they believed in God with many pieces, because they were Kabbalists. And they fought, and they fought, and they sat on the same Beit Din until the day they died. They refused to separate the 2 separate, but they did. One Beit Din. In Rav Kapach's letters of Halacha, you'll find letters that Rabbi Halevy writes to him, asking him his halachic opinion on things. And in Rabbi Halevy's letters, you'll find that Rabbi Kapach sent letters to him, asking him for his opinion on things. Because they were very close, but they fought. That generation of knowing how to fight but not to hate each other we were taught to be politically correct. And we thought we did a service to the world. But essentially what we did was that if I disagree with you, the only way I can disagree with you is if I actually have a reason to hate you. But I can't disagree with you and like you. It's the opposite of what we're taught political correctness is, but that's what it turns out. That's the result that it gives. I see we're over time. We'll continue this tomorrow. But I want to just share his next piece, and especially the third piece, is about tolerance. And Rav Weinberg says you should know one thing about the word tolerance. How do you say tolerance in Hebrew? Sovlanut. Not savlanut. Savlanut is patience. Sovlanut comes from the word sovel or lisbol. What does it mean? To suffer.
Yeah.
Like I love sovelut. I can't stand you.
Yeah.
So sovlanut means I'm going to put up with you. Tolerance. But the Israeli way. Yeah? I'll put up with you. That's tolerance. Rav Weinberg says, do you know the problem with tolerance aside from being a modern concept? He said sovlanut is synonymous with another Hebrew word called adishut, which is apathy or lack of care. He said, if I'm tolerant of your worldview, it's because I say, listen, I don't care about your worldview. Let's just get along with each other. He said, but if you're a person who's passionate about your worldview, how should it make you feel when I tell you that I don't care about it? He's turning the word over on upside down. He says, if I don't care about your beliefs and that's why I tolerate you, he said, what greater insult is there to your intelligence than that? He said, rather I'll tell you that tolerance is something you can have to people outside of the Jewish people. So some guy on the street, let's say, in your family, you cannot be tolerant of a sibling. You can love your sibling, you can hate your sibling, you don't tolerate a sibling. You can tolerate the guy in the street who, you don't have to have a relationship with him, and therefore you can tolerate him. He said, but if you have a brother who starts to hate your mother and ruin her life, and you tolerate him, you're saying, I don't really care about what he does. This is what he writes, and we're going to read it together. He said, the feelings of love that a brother must have will be replaced with feelings of hate. But those feelings of hate are good feelings of hate, says Rabbi Weinberg. Because they come from a place of caring. A place of, I care about what it is that you do with your life. I'm passionate about you just like you're passionate about me. He said, tolerance comes from a lack of passion, a lack of caring. He said, this is what Rabbi Weinberg says. He said, I can't promise you that I'm going to love you. But I can promise you that I will never tolerate you. And that sounds so bad. He says, I promise you that I will never, ever not care about you. He said, at the end of the day we'll fight, but we're brothers. And we're part of the same family. And we have to understand that, says Rabbi Weinberg. Because that's the only way we can be part of a dialogue. It's to know that tolerance is not the goal. The goal is to have a passionate relationship with each other. And for me, we're going to read these words tomorrow, but for me, what I'm trying to bring out in these 9 days, you don't have to agree with Rabbi Weinberg. And there are pieces here, and that's why I left some of the pieces that he wrote out. But Rabbi Weinberg is challenging the way we think about things. And whenever you're challenged about the way you think about something, you have a few choices. One of your choices to just shut down and say, he's wrong, I'm going to do whatever I do anyways. That's the most common and the most childish of all approaches. There's a second approach, which is saying, listen, maybe he has a point. I don't quite feel comfortable with his point. Well, let me think about it. Give me a day, give me a week, give me a few months. I want to think about it in other contexts in my life. Maybe he's right. Maybe he's wrong. But I'm open-minded enough to think about, maybe he's right.
What do you do when you find it wrong?
Then you say, okay, Rabbi Weinberg, I respectfully disagree. And I'll put it on my Facebook feed. I don't know, that's what people do today. You know, that's people, everything they think, they're putting there. So
you're giving, I mean, it's nice, it's an interesting way to put it, but tolerance and tolerate, while they're related terms, they have absolutely different meanings. To tolerate somebody in English, it means very patronizing, very don't care, you know, you're not really concerned with the substance of the argument. But tolerance is a noun, and it's got a whole different connotation.
What's the connotation?
It doesn't mean you don't care. It means that you respect the other person's point of view. And you don't agree with it necessarily, but you're willing to live with it. Not being able to tolerating somebody is a whole different connotation.
What is the verb of tolerance?
The verb of tolerance?
How do I have tolerance towards someone?
Well, I'm thinking about it.
No, yeah. I'm not putting you. I'm asking you. Like, what word would we use?
I'd be interested to look at a thesaurus in English to see.
And figure it out.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can see that.
By the way, if you could do your homework, that would help us out, because maybe I'm translating from Hebrew.
Yeah.
So I'm using the word sovlanut, whatever that means, and probably more in the word with tolerate and tolerance.
Yeah.
But even the term tolerance that you mentioned, in my opinion, also has its problems. But I'm willing to say that it's
It's a different word, but it's a whole different connotation. I'll try to bring a thesaurus and show you the difference.
okay, sure. Well, Rabbi Weinberg is in that case would say, I'm challenging you that this is a modern invention. He said we used to be able to hate each other and love each other at the same time, not just have tolerance towards each other. Which we could say, thank God we're past those days. But there were such days and there are such days, and B'ezrat Hashem, I'll end off with a good story. The Chavetz Chaim was once asked. He was very vocal about, don't fight the Hasidim, be friends with the Hasidim, which was a pretty radical thing for a Polish rabbi to do at the time. That wasn't Hasidic. So someone came to the Chavetz Chaim and said, you love Hasidim so much, why don't you just become a Hasid? You always speak so nicely about them. And this goes back to the first thing I said today in our class, from the Rambam. The Chavetz Chaim said, after 120 years, when I go up to Mir Hashem, the Talmud says there are 6 questions I'm going to be asked. Did I do business honestly? Did I make time to learn Torah? Did I wait for the redemption? One of them was not my affiliation with the Hasidic movement or the non-Hasidic movement. He said, and therefore it's not one of those things that I feel is really relevant in my life that I have to make a choice where I belong. I'm just Jewish. And that saying of the Chavetz Chaim was very important. We love everybody. We're pro everybody. And we disagree with everybody about the things that we have to disagree with them about. But that doesn't stop us from loving them. It doesn't stop us from respecting them. But unless we're able to voice our opinions and say, hey, listen, this is what I struggle with you about. This is what I think that you're messing up on very bad. This is the danger that I think you're posing to the Jewish community. I still love you, but I think you're dangerous. To be able to say such a thing, says Rabbi Weinberg, is step number 2 to being able to be united with each other. So, B'ezrat Hashem, see you tomorrow night. God willing.